Work or nursing home? Pick one, Dad. That's exactly what my son Kenneth told me. He said it with such cold indifference, like he was choosing between coffee or tea. I looked at him and smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who understood everything. I stood up, walked into my room, and made one phone call. 20 minutes later, when a man stepped through my front door, my son would learn the truth about the father he had just thrown away. That phone call I made. It's about to turn Kenneth's world upside down. But before the truth comes out, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? You're going to want to see his reaction. Look, Dad, this isn't working out anymore. You're 67, you don't bring in any income, and frankly, we can't keep supporting you like this. So here's the deal. Either you find yourself a job by the end of this week, or we're going to have to look into getting you a spot at one of those nursing homes. Your choice. My son Kenneth delivered those words like he was discussing the weather forecast. Cold, matter-of-fact final. He stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, his wife Brittany right behind him, with that satisfied smirk she wore whenever she got her way. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the same bed I'd been sleeping in for 2 years, since they graciously offered me their spare room. The morning light coming through the cheap curtains made everything look washed out, including the relationship I thought I had with my only child. We've been more than patient, Brittany chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. But we have our own future to think about. Hannah's college fund, the mortgage, our retirement. We just can't afford another mouth to feed indefinitely. Another mouth to feed. Like I was some stray dog they'd taken pity on. Kenneth nodded, warming up to his speech. And before you start with the guilt trip about raising me alone after Mom died, that was your job as a parent. I don't owe you anything for doing what you were supposed to do. I looked at this man who shared my blood, my name, and wondered when his heart had turned to stone. This was the same boy who used to beg me for bedtime stories, who cried when his goldfish died, who promised he'd take care of me when I got old. Sunset Manor has an opening, Brittany added helpfully. It's not that expensive, and your Social Security should cover most of it. Sunset Manor. I'd driven past that place plenty of times, seen the empty faces pressed against windows watching life happen without them. So what's it going to be? Kenneth crossed his arms. Job hunting or house hunting? I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 67 years in my bones. But underneath that weariness was something else. Something they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and had never bothered to discover. I hear you loud and clear, I said quietly. That seemed to satisfy them. Kenneth's shoulders relaxed, like he'd just finished an unpleasant chore. Good. Glad we understand each other. They walked out together, Kenneth's hand on Brittany's back, leaving me alone with the silence and the smell of their breakfast cooking downstairs. Breakfast I apparently wasn't invited to share. I pulled my old leather suitcase from the closet, the same one I'd carried when I first arrived in Wyoming 30 years ago. Still sturdy, still reliable. Like me, it had more life left than people gave it credit for. As I folded my work clothes, my mind drifted back through the decades. All those early mornings, all those long days, all that time I'd spent building something they knew absolutely nothing about. Kenneth saw a broken-down old man with calloused hands and dirt under his fingernails. If he only knew what those hands had built. I reached for my flip phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago. Charles, I said when the familiar voice answered. It's time. Come get me. You sure about this, sir? Never been more sure of anything in my life. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I continued packing, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up outside. Normal people starting normal days, none of them knowing that everything was about to change. Then I heard it. A deep, powerful rumble growing steadily louder. The unmistakable sound of serious machinery heading this way. From downstairs, I heard Kenneth and Brittany's conversation stop mid-sentence. Footsteps rushed toward the front window. I zipped up my suitcase and smiled. Time to show them who they'd just thrown away. As I reached for my old steel-toed work boots, memories flooded back. These scuffed companions held secrets Kenneth never bothered to discover. But let me tell you, folks, the real truth about my son and the test I've been running for 30 years. 1994. I was 37, staring at 50 acres of worthless Wyoming land. The real estate agent shook his head. No utilities, no road access, Mr. Foster. Just dirt and dreams. I grabbed a handful of that soil. Sometimes the best things are hidden where nobody expects them. That was the beginning. Year after year, I added more land. 20 acres here, 40 there. Worked 3 jobs, construction days, security nights, lumberyard weekends. Every extra dollar went into expanding what would become something magnificent. By 2010, I owned 500 acres of prime ranch land, cattle horses, a main house that belonged in magazines. The Foster Ranch was worth more than most folks in Jackson Hole would see in 3 lifetimes. But here's the thing. I kept it completely secret. Why? Because I wanted to test my son's character. Kenneth was 9 when I started building. Bright kid who promised, "Dad, when I'm rich, I'll buy you a big house. Just be a good man, son," I'd tell him. That's worth more than money. At 18, he couldn't wait to escape. "I'm done with this small-town life. I want more than working with my hands like some laborer." That stung, but I kept building, kept hoping he'd learn what really mattered. For 15 years, Kenneth chased his corporate dreams in Denver, called twice a year, usually needing money. I'd send what I could from my construction wages, never mentioning I could write him a check for 100 times that amount. 2 years ago, his world collapsed. Startup failed, lost their condo credit destroyed. At 37, he came crawling back. "Dad, could we stay here just until we get back on our feet?" I opened my door immediately. "This is your home, son." Here was my chance. If Kenneth had learned humility, if he'd gained respect for simple values, for family, over money, then I'd reveal everything. Share the legacy I'd built for him. Instead, I got the ultimatum you just heard. Within a month, they'd moved me to the smallest room. Brittany treated me like unwelcome furniture. Kenneth acted like I was a burden he was graciously carrying. For 2 years, I watched him choose pride over gratitude, entitlement over respect. The final test was this morning's demand, work or nursing home. He failed spectacularly. The rumble outside was now right at our front door. I could hear Kenneth's confused footsteps, Brittany's sharp questions echoing from downstairs. I smiled as my suitcase clicked shut. Time to show them what they'd just thrown away and what true character looks like. The gleaming black Mercedes-Benz S-Class rolled through the neighborhood like it owned the place, which in a way it did. Chrome bumpers caught the morning sun-tinted windows reflecting the modest houses that suddenly looked shabby by comparison. This wasn't the kind of vehicle that belonged on Maple Street. I heard the front door slam downstairs, followed by Kenneth's voice, high and tight with confusion. "What the hell is that thing doing here?" Through my bedroom window, I watched my son and daughter-in-law rush onto the front porch, their morning coffee forgotten. Brittany clutched her bathrobe closed, squinting at the luxury sedan like it might bite her. Kenneth stood with his hands on his hips, trying to look authoritative, but mostly managing to look lost. The Mercedes came to a stop with the kind of quiet precision that only comes from German engineering and serious money. For a moment, nothing happened. The engine idled with a barely audible purr, while Kenneth and Brittany exchanged worried glances. Then the driver's door opened. Charles stepped out like he'd done this 1,000 times before. 52 years old, wearing a crisp white shirt, dark slacks, and boots that had seen honest work but were polished to perfection. His gray hair was neat, his posture straight, and when he looked toward the house, there was something in his bearing that commanded respect. "Excuse me," Kenneth called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Can I help you?" Charles didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked around to the passenger side of the Mercedes and stood there, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. That's when I made my entrance. I walked down those stairs with my head high and my old leather suitcase in hand, feeling more like myself than I had in 2 years. Each step was deliberate, unhurried. A man was somewhere important to be. Kenneth's jaw dropped when he saw me. "Dad, what are you doing? Where are you going with that suitcase?" I paused on the front porch looking at my son and his wife. 2 people who'd just told me I was worthless, who'd given me an ultimatum, like I was some kind of burden they'd graciously carried long enough. "Well," I said, my voice calm as Wyoming morning air, "you wanted me to find work." "But Dad, I didn't mean—" "Charles," I called to the man by the Mercedes, cutting Kenneth off mid-sentence. "Yes, sir, Mr. Foster," Charles replied, and I caught the sharp intake of breath from Brittany at the respectful tone. I walked past Kenneth and Brittany without another word, my boots clicking on the concrete walkway. Behind me, I could hear my son's desperate voice. "Wait, who is this guy, Dad? What's going on? Where do you even know him from?" Charles opened the rear door of the Mercedes with a slight bow of his head. The leather interior was immaculate, the kind of luxury Kenneth had always dreamed about, but never quite achieved. Sir Charles said, gesturing toward the open door. I turned back, one last time. Kenneth was standing on the porch with his mouth hanging open, Brittany beside him, looking like she'd seen a ghost. Neighbors were peeking out from behind curtains, drawn by the commotion and the expensive car that didn't belong in their world. "You said I needed to find work," I repeated, settling my suitcase on the seat. "Well, I've got work to do." As I climbed into the Mercedes, I heard Kenneth's voice rise to near panic. "Dad, wait. Who is this man? How do you know him? Where are you going?" Charles closed the door with a solid thunk that sealed out Kenneth's increasingly frantic questions. Through the tinted window, I watched my son run toward the car Brittany, close behind both of them, looking like their world had just tilted sideways. Charles got behind the wheel, adjusted his mirrors, and looked at me in the rear view. "Ready, sir." "I've been ready for 30 years, Charles." As we pulled away from the curb, I saw Kenneth in the side mirror, standing in the middle of the street in his pajamas, watching the Mercedes disappear around the corner. Let him wonder. Let him think. Let him realize that maybe, just maybe, he didn't know his father as well as he thought he did. The leather seat embraced me like an old friend as Charles navigated through the neighborhood streets. Behind us, I could see Kenneth sprinting back toward his house, probably to grab his keys. Brittany was already ahead of him, her silk robe flying as she rushed to their beat-up Honda. "Sir," Charles said quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror, "it appears we're about to have company." Sure enough, Kenneth's car came roaring up behind us, weaving slightly as he struggled to catch up while probably trying to call someone at the same time. I could picture his face, that same desperate expression he'd worn as a kid when he realized he'd been caught in a lie. We'd barely reached the main highway when Kenneth pulled alongside us, gesturing frantically for us to stop. His window was down, his hair wild from the wind. "Dad, pull over. We need to talk." Charles maintained his steady speed, professional as always. "Instructions, sir." "Keep driving. Let him follow." Kenneth fell back, then sped up again, this time managing to get slightly ahead of us, before swerving into our lane. Charles smoothly changed lanes, never losing his calm. "Quite persistent, isn't he?" Charles observed. "He gets that from his mother." Finally, Kenneth gave up the dangerous highway maneuvers and settled for following at a distance. I could see Brittany in the passenger seat, her phone pressed to her ear, probably trying to figure out who Charles was or what kind of car we were driving. 20 minutes later, we turned off the main highway onto a private road. Kenneth's Honda stayed right behind us, close enough that I could see his knuckles, white on the steering wheel. "Almost home, sir," Charles said. Home. The word felt good, rolling around in my mind. Not Kenneth's spare bedroom with its thin walls and thinner welcome. Not the nursing home Brittany had probably already researched. Home. The road curved through a stand of aspens, their leaves catching the morning light like scattered gold coins. Beyond them, the landscape opened up into something Kenneth had never seen before. Something he'd never bothered to ask about during all those years of taking my construction wages for granted. My God! I heard Kenneth's voice through his open windows as we crested the small hill. Before us stretched 500 acres of the finest ranch land in Wyoming. Green pastures rolled toward the mountains like a carpet designed by nature herself. Black Angus cattle dotted the fields, their coats gleaming in the sunshine. A pristine white fence ran along the road, leading to an entrance that took Kenneth's breath away. The gates stood 12 feet high, crafted from wrought iron and local stone. Above them, spelled out in elegant metalwork, were the words "Foster Ranch, established 1994. Kenneth's Honda came to a complete stop behind us. Sir Charles asked, his hand hovering over the gate remote. I rolled down my window and looked back at my son's car. Through the windshield, I could see Kenneth's face, pale, confused, his mouth moving as he tried to process what he was seeing. Brittany was leaning forward, her eyes wide, probably calculating property values in her head. "You know what, Charles, stop here for a moment." Charles brought the Mercedes to a smooth halt, just in front of the gates. I got out of the car, straightening my shirt, and walked back toward Kenneth's Honda. Kenneth rolled down his window, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, what is this place?" "This," I said, gesturing toward the gates, "is what I built while you were busy telling me I was worthless. But how when I don't understand—" 30 years, son. Every morning I left before dawn, every night I came home covered in dust. You thought I was just some broken-down construction worker." I paused, letting that sink in. "Foster Ranch, 500 acres, my name on the deed." Brittany finally found her voice. "This is impossible. I live in your spare room because I wanted to see what kind of man my son had become." I looked directly at Kenneth. Now I know. Charles had gotten out of the Mercedes and was standing respectfully nearby, waiting for instructions. "Charles," I called, "open the gates." "Yes, sir, Mr. Foster." The massive gate swung open silently, revealing a paved drive that curved toward a main house that belonged in Architectural Digest. I walked back toward the Mercedes, then turned one final time toward Kenneth's stunned face. You wanted me to find work, son? Well, I've got a ranch to run. 3 days of sleepless nights showed on Kenneth's face as his Honda approached the Foster Ranch gates. I watched from the porch as he sat there, probably rehearsing his speech. Charles appeared beside me. Shall I send him away, sir? Let's hear what he has to say. Kenneth's car crept up the driveway like he was entering foreign territory. I'd spent these 3 days reacquainting myself with my real home. Morning coffee on the wraparound porch, evening walks through pastures I'd dreamed about for decades. Kenneth parked and climbed out with Brittany, both gawking like tourists. The main house rose before them, 3 stories of native stone and timber that belonged in magazines. Dad, Kenneth called, his voice carrying unfamiliar humility. Thank you for seeing us. I stayed on the porch, making him come to me. Charles positioned himself nearby. Yeah, I owe you a massive apology, Kenneth said, climbing the steps. I was completely wrong about everything. Brittany hung back, her calculating eyes studying the hand-carved railings, the custom stonework, the solar panels glinting on distant barns. Go on, I said. All these years I thought you were just... He gestured helplessly at the prize Angus, grazing nearby, the John Deere equipment lined up like soldiers. I had no idea you'd built something so incredible. This place must be worth millions. There it was. Not pride in my accomplishment, just the bottom line. Money isn't everything, son. Of course not. That's not what I meant. But his eyes kept wandering to the cattle, the equipment, the obvious wealth surrounding us. Brittany finally approached, having finished her mental property assessment. Greg, this is absolutely stunning. I had no idea you were so accomplished. What I'm trying to say, Kenneth rushed on, is I want to make things right. Be the son you deserve. And what would that look like? Maybe Hannah could visit, sometimes get to know her grandfather, learn about ranch life. This would be amazing for a kid. I studied his face. 3 days ago, nursing home. Today, grandfather visitation rights. The transformation was remarkable and completely transparent. Supervised visits, I said carefully. Short ones. Whatever you think is best. Kenneth's relief was obvious. You know what's right for her. Charles cleared his throat. Mr. Foster, I need to check the south pasture. Go ahead. Kenneth watched Charles walk toward a pristine Ford F-350. How many people work here? Enough. And the land extends how far? Far enough. Frustration flickered behind Kenneth's forced smile. He wanted numbers, details, financial projections. Actually, Brittany said suddenly, we were wondering if Hannah could stay for a few days. This week, Kenneth has some job interviews in Denver, and I have that conference in Salt Lake City. My heart jumped, but I kept my expression neutral. A few days. Just while we're both traveling. She'd love it here, and honestly, we could use some time to sort things out. Kenneth's eagerness was barely contained. I looked at these 2 people who'd just discovered their meal ticket and were already figuring out how to cash it in. All right, bring her tomorrow. We should head back, Brittany said, checking her phone. Let you get back to your ranch management. They walked to their Honda in silence, but urgent whispers carried as they reached the car. Did you see those cattle championship bloodlines? The equipment alone has to be worth. We need to play this smart, Kenneth. As they drove toward the gates, Brittany's voice drifted through Kenneth's open window. We need to get control of this place, and that little girl is our way in. I smiled grimly and headed inside. Let the games begin. 1 week later, Kenneth sat hunched over his kitchen table like a man plotting war. Empty coffee cups and crumpled papers littered the surface, evidence of sleepless nights spent wrestling with a problem that had consumed his every waking thought. We can't just let him sit on all that wealth, he muttered, running his hands through unwashed hair. That ranch should be ours. I'm his only son, his only family. Brittany paced behind him, her silk robe swishing with each calculated step. She'd been the architect of this conversation from the moment they'd left Foster Ranch, planting seeds of resentment that had grown into full-blown obsession. Your father humiliated us, Kenneth, made us look like fools in front of the neighbors, and now he's living like some kind of king while we're stuck in this. She gestured dismissively at their modest surroundings. But what can we do? He owns everything legally. Built it with his own money. Brittany stopped pacing, a cold smile spreading across her perfectly made-up face. There's always a way, darling. We just need to be creative. The next morning found them in the sterile office of Marcus Webb, a lawyer, whose reputation for bending ethics had made him wealthy and despised in equal measure. Webb listened to their story with the practiced attention of a man who'd heard every sob story in the book. "So let me understand this correctly," Webb said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your elderly father has been, what's the phrase you used? Manipulating your daughter?" "Exactly." Brittany jumped in. "He's been filling Hannah's head with ideas about ranch life, making her think she belongs there instead of with her real family." Kenneth shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, Hannah does seem to enjoy visiting." "That's exactly the problem." Brittany's voice rose. "Don't you see, he's using her emotional attachment to drive a wedge between us. It's textbook manipulation." Webb made notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen scratching like a spider spinning its web. "And you believe this constitutes unlawful detention? Think about it." Brittany continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "An elderly man living alone on an isolated property, convincing a young child that she's better off with him than her parents. When we try to bring her home, she cries and begs to stay. That's not normal grandparent affection, that's coercion." Kenneth stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The way she twisted every innocent moment between Hannah and her grandfather into something sinister. The calculated precision with which she built their case. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Kenneth asked quietly. Webb set down his pen and steepled his fingers. "Unlawful detention of a minor. Emotional manipulation. Possibly elder abuse charges if we can demonstrate that your father's judgment is compromised." "Elder abuse," Kenneth's voice cracked. "Think about it," Webb continued smoothly. "A man his age living alone on such a large property, making impulsive decisions like cutting off his family. We could argue diminished capacity, unsafe living conditions for a child." Brittany leaned forward eagerly. "What would we need to prove it?" "Witness statements, documentation of erratic behavior, evidence that the child is being held against her parents' wishes." Webb's smile was reptilian. "I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow." That evening, Kenneth sat in his living room staring at the legal documents Webb had prepared. The words swam before his eyes. Unlawful detention. Child endangerment. Unfit guardian. "You're having second thoughts," Brittany observed from the doorway. "He's my father, Britt. These charges, they could destroy him." "He destroyed us first." She sat beside him, her voice soft and poisonous. "Do you think he cared about destroying our dignity when he let us grovel in front of the neighbors? Do you think he cared about our future when he kept his fortune secret all these years?" Kenneth looked at the papers again. His father's name appeared dozens of times each, mention another nail in the coffin they were building. "Hannah loves him," he whispered. "Hannah is 8 years old. She doesn't understand what's best for her." Brittany's hand found his shoulder, her touch cold despite its gentleness. "We're her parents, Kenneth. We decide what's best." The next morning, Kenneth stood outside the courthouse with the manila envelope in his sweating palms. Inside were sworn statements, legal documents, and a narrative that painted his father as a dangerous manipulator, preying on a child's innocence. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one final time. Brittany's smile was triumphant. "We file this morning. His little game ends today." What started as a few days had stretched into 2 weeks, and I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Hannah's laughter echoed across the Foster Ranch pastures like music I'd forgotten existed. "Grandpa Greg, look how fast I can run," she called, pigtails bouncing as she chased a wandering calf. When Kenneth and Brittany had dropped her off, they'd said, "A few days while we handle business." They'd call occasionally to check in asking how she was doing, but never mentioning when they'd pick her up. And every time Hannah got on the phone, she'd beg, "Please, Daddy, can I stay longer? Grandpa's teaching me to ride." Kenneth would always chuckle and say, "If your grandpa doesn't mind the company." Hannah took to ranch life like she was born for it, feeding chickens at dawn, brushing horses, helping Charles check cattle. Her fearless spirit reminded me of Kenneth at that age, back when he still had wonder in his eyes. "Can we practice riding again?" she asked, breathless from her impromptu race. "After lunch. Charles will teach you about horse hooves." "Really, that's so cool." Charles appeared leading Buttercup, our gentlest mare. "Ready for your lesson, Miss Hannah." She scrambled onto the fence rail, completely comfortable around 1,000-pound animals. No fear, just pure joy. That's when I heard the vehicles. 2 police cruisers came up the drive, instantly changing our peaceful afternoon. Hannah noticed, her smile fading. "Grandpa, why are police here?" "Stay with Charles, sweetheart." Officer Martinez approached professionally. "Mr. Foster, we need to discuss allegations that have been filed." What allegations? Unlawful detention of a minor. A complaint states you're keeping your granddaughter against her parents' wishes. The words hit like a punch. Now I understood why. They'd been setting their trap, letting Hannah get attached so they could later claim I was holding her against their will. Hannah walked over, confused. What's detention mean? Officer Martinez knelt to her level. Hi, honey. Can you tell me how you feel about being here? I love it here. Hannah's response was immediate. Grandpa teaches me about horses and cows. Charles showed me egg collecting. We make pancakes every morning. And did your grandpa ever say you couldn't go home? Hannah's eyes widened. No, Grandpa said I could call Mommy and Daddy any time, but I like it here better. My heart swelled with pride and broke simultaneously. This innocent child was being weaponized against me. The complaint alleges 2 weeks without parental contact, Martinez said. That's false. I have text messages and call logs proving regular contact. She talks to them every few days. Charles stepped forward. Officer, I've been here every day. This little girl is the happiest I've ever seen her. She talks about her parents, but genuinely loves being here. I don't want to go home yet, Hannah said, voice small. Can't I stay longer? Martinez looked between Hannah's pleading face and my bewildered expression, clearly trying to reconcile the complaint with reality. Sir, I see she's well cared for and happy, but we must investigate allegations of emotional manipulation and unsafe conditions thoroughly. Unsafe. I gestured around the pristine ranch. Look at this place. Look at her. Hannah grabbed my hand. Grandpa didn't do anything wrong. He's the best grandpa ever. Tears formed in her eyes. Martinez sighed. Mr. Foster, you need to come for questioning. Standard procedure. What about Hannah? Child Services will speak with her separately. We'll contact her parents immediately. Looking down at Hannah's frightened face, I realized the full scope of Kenneth and Brittany's strategy. Use their own daughter as bait, then cry kidnapping when she didn't want to leave. Grandpa, Hannah whispered, did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart. You did everything right. But as Martinez gestured toward the patrol car, I knew the real fight was just beginning. 2 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps, with justice finally within reach. The legal battle had been ugly, but today would end it. Inside, Kenneth and Brittany sat with their lawyer, looking like defendants in their own trial. The evidence had mounted against them text messages proving they'd asked me to keep Hannah phone records showing regular contact, and financial documents revealing their sudden interest in my estate after discovering the ranch. Judge Patricia Coleman had seen family greed disguised as concern before. She'd listened to 2 months of testimony with the patience of someone who understood truth, usually lay between accusations and denials. Hannah had been the star witness, speaking with 8-year-old clarity about where she belonged. When Judge Coleman asked directly, Hannah, where do you want to live? Her answer came without hesitation. With Grandpa Greg on the ranch, that's my home. Kenneth had broken down then, not from losing the case, but from finally seeing what he'd become. A man willing to use his daughter as a weapon against the father who'd given him everything. All rise, the bailiff called for the final ruling. After reviewing all evidence, Judge Coleman began, this court finds no evidence of coercion, manipulation, or unlawful detention. The child has clearly expressed her preferences, and has been well cared for and genuinely happy in her grandfather's custody. Hannah squeezed my hand. Furthermore, this court is troubled by evidence suggesting complainant's motives were driven by financial considerations, discovered only after learning of defendant's assets, not the child's best interests. Brittany went white. Kenneth stared at the floor. Custody is hereby awarded to Gregory Foster, with supervised visitation rights to biological parents. The gavel fell like thunder. It was over. 6 months later, I watched Kenneth split firewood behind the main house, his soft hands now calloused from honest work. Brittany had left 2 weeks after the trial, disappearing back to whatever hole she'd crawled from. Dad, Kenneth had said that first day he'd shown up asking for work. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to learn how to be the man you tried to raise. It was a start. Hannah came running across the pasture school backpack, bouncing. At 9 now, she moved through the ranch like she owned it, which according to my updated will, she would someday. Grandpa, Daddy, look what I drew. She held up a crayon drawing of our family. 3 generations standing in front of the ranch house, all smiling under a bright yellow sun. Kenneth wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. That's beautiful, sweetheart. It's us, Hannah said proudly, our real family. As sunset painted the Foster Ranch golden that evening, I sat on the porch, watching Kenneth teach Hannah to whittle, the same skill I'd tried teaching him 30 years ago. Some lessons take longer to learn, but they're worth the wait. Charles appeared with 3 glasses of lemonade. Beautiful evening, sir. Yes, it is. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and choosing to stand by each other when times get tough. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to get it right. What do you think makes a real family? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the values that truly matter. You know, folks, after everything I've been through, I've learned that God has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Sometimes He strips away everything we think we know about the people we love just to show us what really matters. When Kenneth told me to choose between work and a nursing home, I thought my world was ending. But God had other plans. He'd been preparing me for 30 years, building not just a ranch, but the strength to stand up for what's right. These grandpa stories aren't just about family drama. They're about discovering that real wealth isn't measured in acres or cattle, but in the love and respect we earn from those who truly know us. Hannah taught me that true story moments happen when we choose courage over comfort. At 8 years old, she had the wisdom to see through her parents' greed and choose genuine love over empty promises. God blessed me with a granddaughter who understood what her father had forgotten, that family bonds are built on character, not bank accounts. The hardest lesson. Sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who test our faith the deepest. But if we trust in God's timing and stay true to our values, He'll reveal the truth when it matters most. This true story reminded me that we can't control how others see us, but we can control how we respond when they try to tear us down. These grandpa stories teach us that legacy isn't what we leave behind in our wills. It's the values we pass down through our actions even when nobody's watching. What family lessons has God taught you through difficult times? Share your own true story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how faith helped you through family challenges. And if this grandpa story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that love always wins over greed. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about the power of family faith and never giving up on the people we love. By Christmas, we'll own everything, and the old man will be bankrupt. Those were the words that shattered my world when I caught my son-in-law with my future daughter-in-law during the wedding rehearsal. I was in total shock discovering they were plotting to destroy everything I'd built over 30 years. What I witnessed wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy that would leave my family in ruins. They thought I was just another trusting father too blind to see what was happening right under my nose. But they had no idea that when their wedding day arrived, their perfect plan would crumble in the hands of this old man. Thank you for being here as I share what happened to my family. Before I tell you how this old man turned the tables on those who betrayed him, let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. My name is Steve Bennett, and at 58, I thought I had life figured out. After 3 decades of sweat sacrifice and more 16-hour days than I care to count, Mitchell Construction had grown from a 2-man operation in my garage to a $15 million family business right here in Denver, Colorado. We'd built some of the most beautiful homes in the Rocky Mountain region, and I couldn't have been prouder. Friday afternoon found us at the Denver Botanic Gardens, specifically in the stunning orangery, where the warm glass walls created the perfect setting for our wedding rehearsal. The space was magical tropical plants reaching toward the glass ceiling, soft afternoon light filtering through, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. Tomorrow would be Saturday for final preparations, and Sunday. Sunday would be Joshua's wedding day. My son Joshua, 26 years old and already our lead engineer, stood near the altar area with the biggest smile I'd seen on his face since he graduated from Colorado State. He'd inherited his mother's gentle spirit and my stubborn determination, a combination that served him well in both life and business. Beside him, radiant in a simple blue dress, stood Ashley Morgan, his fiancée. At 24, she was everything we could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Intelligent, accomplished as a financial advisor, and clearly head over heels in love with my boy. "Dad, can you believe this is actually happening?" Joshua had whispered to me earlier, his eyes never leaving Ashley as she chatted with the wedding coordinator. My daughter Nancy caught my attention from across the room. At 32, she'd proven herself invaluable as our chief financial officer, bringing a sharp business mind and fierce loyalty to Mitchell Construction. She'd been married to Matthew Taylor for 3 years now, and I couldn't ask for a better son-in-law. Matthew, a successful corporate attorney at 34, had seamlessly integrated into our family, often joining our Sunday dinners and even helping with legal matters for the company. The rehearsal was going smoothly, everyone laughing and sharing stories, the photographer capturing candid moments of our family's joy. This was what I'd worked for, not just the financial success, but these moments of pure happiness with the people I loved most. As I watched Ashley practice walking down the aisle, something stirred in my heart. My grandmother's engagement ring, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations of Bennett women, was sitting in my safe at home. Originally, I'd planned to give it to Joshua so he could present it to Ashley on their wedding night. But standing here, watching this beautiful young woman who was about to become part of our family, I felt moved to make it a surprise. The ring represented legacy family continuity, everything that Mitchell Construction and the Bennett name stood for. Ashley deserved to know she wasn't just marrying Joshua. She was becoming part of something bigger, something that had been built with love and dedication across generations. I made my decision right there in that glass-walled sanctuary, surrounded by the warmth of family and the promise of new beginnings. I needed to find Ashley and give her that ring today. The search took me through the Denver Botanic Gardens, excitement about the ring growing with each step. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, but Ashley was nowhere to be found. I checked the exhibit hall first, then the greenhouse sections. A few visitors wandered around, but no sign of my future daughter-in-law. The outdoor patios where wedding guests had gathered also came up empty. Has anyone seen Ashley? I asked Joshua's college friends taking photos near the water feature. They shook their heads, too busy with their selfies to help. My son appeared around the corner, clipboard in hand, looking every bit the organized groom to be. His sleeves were rolled up, that focused expression he got during complex construction projects written across his face. Josh, you haven't seen your bride-to-be, have you? I wanted to chat with her about something. He glanced up from his notes, distracted. Oh, Ashley. She mentioned needing to make calls to her family back in California. Wedding planning, everyone wants updates. He gestured toward the secluded areas. She probably wanted somewhere quiet without all this chaos. That made sense. Ashley's parents couldn't travel until Sunday morning, so she'd been fielding calls all week. I continued searching through the garden sections, checking meditation areas and quiet benches where someone might go for privacy. But as I walked, something began nagging at me. It wasn't just Ashley who'd vanished. I realized I hadn't seen Matthew since the rehearsal ended 20 minutes ago. My son-in-law usually stuck around to help clean up, make sure everything ran smoothly. He took his role as the responsible older son-in-law, seriously often being the last to leave family gatherings. Where would both of them have disappeared to at the same time? The rational part of my mind offered explanations. Matthew was a corporate attorney. Urgent client calls were his reality. Ashley was managing wedding details from 3 states away. Family calls made sense, but something about the timing felt off. In 30 years running Mitchell Construction, I'd learned to trust my instincts. When subcontractors gave excuses that sounded reasonable but felt rehearsed. When clients claimed delays that seemed too convenient. When numbers looked right, but my gut said otherwise, that's when I dug deeper. Right now, my instincts were screaming something wasn't right. The gardens welcoming just minutes before now seemed too large with too many secluded corners, where conversations could happen away from curious ears. The very privacy that made this venue perfect for intimate celebrations now felt like it was concealing something. I found myself walking more slowly, listening carefully to sounds around me. Distant laughter of visitors, rustling leaves in the Colorado breeze, soft bubbling of water features throughout the grounds. That's when I heard them voices drifting from the rose garden, the most intimate and secluded section. The area was designed for quiet contemplation and romantic moments, with winding paths leading to hidden alcoves surrounded by fragrant blooms. One voice sounded remarkably familiar, though I couldn't place it from this distance. Something in my gut told me I needed to investigate. My feet carried me toward those familiar voices, curiosity overriding caution, as I navigated the winding stone pathways that led deeper into the rose garden. The late afternoon shadows grew longer here, creating natural hiding spots among the carefully cultivated beds of autumn blooms. The voices grew clearer as I approached, and I found myself moving with deliberate steps, aware of every sound my footsteps might make on the gravel path. Then I saw them. Hidden behind a massive old oak tree, 2 figures were locked in an embrace that made my blood run cold. Matthew, my son-in-law, the man I'd welcomed into our family 3 years ago, had his arms wrapped around Ashley, my son's fiancée, the young woman who was supposed to walk down the aisle in 2 days. They were kissing with the passion of lovers, not the casual affection of future family members. This can't be happening, I whispered to myself, the words barely audible. Not in my family, not with these people. The shock hit me like a physical blow, but something deeper kicked in, pure parental instinct. When you witness betrayal, this devastating, you don't just stand there paralyzed. You get proof. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, but I managed to steady them enough to start recording. The camera captured everything: Matthew's hand tangled in Ashley's blonde hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, the way they held each other, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. I positioned myself behind a cluster of rosebush's thorns, catching at my jacket as I tried to get a clear angle. My heart pounded so hard I feared they might hear it, but they seemed completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to the world around them. That's when their conversation reached my ears. "Baby, I can't believe we're almost there," Ashley murmured against Matthew's lips, her voice soft but clear in the quiet garden air. "After nearly 2 years of planning, everything is finally falling into place." Matthew replied, his voice carrying that same confident tone he used during family dinners. 2 years of planning. The word struck me like lightning. This wasn't some sudden attraction, some moment of weakness at a wedding rehearsal. This had been orchestrated for 2 years, almost since the beginning of Joshua and Ashley's relationship. I kept the camera rolling, my mind automatically cataloging details while my heart shattered. The way they touched each other spoke of intimacy and familiarity. The way they talked suggested this was routine, comfortable, established. "I know it's been hard pretending all this time," Ashley continued, pulling back to look into Matthew's eyes. "But we're so close now. The hardest part was watching Joshua fall for you," Matthew said, his voice carrying no trace of guilt. "Sometimes I wondered if you might actually develop feelings for him." Ashley laughed, a sound that should have been musical, but now seemed cold and calculating. "He's sweet, but he's just a means to an end. We both know that." My knees felt weak. This wasn't just an affair. The casual way they discussed my son, the clinical detachment when they talked about Joshua's feelings, it suggested something far more sinister than simple infidelity. I pressed deeper into the shadows, ensuring the phone captured every word. Whatever this was, whatever they were planning, I needed evidence. I needed proof of what I was witnessing. The phrase 2 years of planning echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Something much larger and more devastating than an affair was unfolding before my eyes. The conversation continued, and with each word, the true scope of their betrayal became clearer. I kept my phone steady, capturing every syllable. "Sunday night, after the I-dos, we'll have everything we need to finish this," Matthew said, his voice carrying cold confidence. Ashley pulled back slightly, eyes gleaming. "Your sweet brother-in-law will sign those papers thinking they're just marriage documents. He trusts you completely. Our backup company is ready to move the moment things shift." Ashley continued, running her fingers along Matthew's lapel. Matthew's laugh was low. "All those strategic connections, we've made all those helpful suggestions to Steve about market opportunities. The foundation is perfect. He'll never see it coming," Ashley said with satisfaction. "By Christmas, everything changes. The great Mitchell empire becomes something else entirely." Christmas, 2 months away. Whatever they'd orchestrated was nearly complete. "The beautiful part is how natural it'll all look," Matthew continued. "Poor Steve Bennett, brought down by circumstances beyond his control. Market forces. Bad luck. Unfortunate timing." Ashley traced patterns on his chest. "Nancy still thinks you're the perfect son-in-law, always so helpful with company matters. She has no idea about your alternative interests. And Joshua is so trusting," Matthew replied with mock sympathy. "He'll never suspect his perfect fiancée has other priorities. The poor kid actually believes this is all about love." Their laughter felt like acid. They were discussing my children like pawns in some elaborate game. "What we've built together is worth so much more than this performance," Ashley whispered intimately. "Once we have what we need, we can stop pretending entirely." 2 years of careful positioning," Matthew murmured. 2 years of being the devoted family man while arranging other things. "The timing has to be perfect," Ashley said, suddenly serious. "One signature on Sunday, then we activate everything else. The dominoes are all lined up." "And our friend in the inspector's office?" Matthew asked. "Taken care of. The reports will be unfavorable. Very unfavorable." "What about the Riverside project?" Ashley smiled coldly. Let's just say Steve's going to discover some very expensive problems with that foundation work. Problems that will require immediate attention and significant financial resources he won't have. Brilliant. And the bank? They'll receive some concerning information about Mitchell Construction stability right after the wedding. Anonymous tips about potential irregularities. Nothing traceable, of course. Matthew nodded approvingly. By the time Steve realizes what's happening, the shell company will be the only viable buyer for his assets. A generous rescue offer, really. For pennies on the dollar? Ashley added with satisfaction. The best part is how grateful everyone will think we're being, Matthew said, stepping in to help family during a crisis. So noble. So generous, Ashley agreed mockingly. I felt physically sick. They weren't just having an affair, they were orchestrating something far more sophisticated and devastating. Every casual question Matthew had asked about projects, every time Ashley had offered financial advice, every family dinner had been reconnaissance. Are you sure Joshua won't suspect anything about the papers? Ashley asked. He'll be too happy, too distracted. Besides, he trusts me completely. Why would his beloved brother-in-law deceive him on his wedding day? The cold calculation in their voices was terrifying. They had weaponized my family's love and trust against us, and they were days away from executing whatever final phase they'd planned. My mind reeled as I backed away carefully from their hiding spot, heart hammering against my ribs. Every step away from that oak tree took tremendous effort, the weight of what I'd witnessed crushing. When I emerged from the rose bushes, still clutching my phone, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Nancy stood 20 feet away, partially hidden behind a decorative trellis, her face pale and drawn. "Dad," she said quietly, stepping out from concealment. "I saw you watching them. I've been following them for weeks now. You knew about this." Nancy's expression mixed pain and grim determination. "I suspected Matthew was stealing from us. The numbers haven't been adding up for months. Fake invoices, unauthorized transfers he explained away as accounting adjustments, suspicious meetings with competitors." She moved closer, voice dropping to urgent whisper. Money disappearing, contracts being modified after signing client information, somehow reaching rival firms. Every time I brought concerns to Matthew, he had perfectly reasonable explanations. My worst fears confirmed. This wasn't simple theft. This was systematic corporate sabotage from within our family. I tried warning Joshua 3 weeks ago. Nancy continued, voice tight with frustration. Showed him financial irregularities. Told him I was concerned about Ashley's system access. He exploded at me, Dad. What did he say? That I couldn't stand seeing him successful and in love? That I was trying to sabotage his relationship because I was bitter? He said I was paranoid and needed therapy. Her voice cracked. He chose to believe them over his own sister. And the worst part, Dad. Nancy's voice broke slightly. I've suspected for months that Matthew might be seeing someone else. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he's been so distant. But I never imagined it was Ashley. The pain in her eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't just about business betrayal. It was personal destruction of her marriage, her family, everything she'd trusted. I've been gathering evidence ever since, she said, pulling out her phone. Financial records, email trails, photographs of Matthew meeting competitors. But I needed something concrete, undeniable. I held up my phone screen showing the paused video. I think I got that. Nancy's eyes widened as I played back. Portions Matthew and Ashley's embraced their discussion of the shell company, their cold calculation about Joshua being too trusting. My God, she whispered, it's worse than I thought. They're planning to destroy everything we've built. Now we have everything we need, I said, voice growing stronger. But Joshua won't believe us until he sees it with his own eyes. Even with this video, he might think it's fake or out of context. Nancy nodded grimly. He's so in love, so convinced Ashley is perfect. He'll rationalize anything rather than accept she's been using him. Then we expose them publicly, I said, the plan crystallizing. At the wedding Sunday, in front of 300 guests, including all our business partners and competitors. They won't be able to deny it or spin it. The Brown Palace Hotel. Nancy said, understanding immediately. With all those witnesses, they can't claim the evidence is fabricated. We have tomorrow to prepare everything perfectly. I continued. Technical equipment, make sure the video plays clearly, coordinate with hotel staff. Nancy's expression hardened with determination. They've been planning this for 2 years, Dad. 2 years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Time they faced consequences. Sunday at the Brown Palace Hotel. I said, feeling cold purpose settle over me. We'll give them a wedding they'll never forget. Saturday morning, we got to work on the most important presentation of our lives. There was no room for error, no second chances. Everything had to be perfect. My first call went to Detective Mark Johnson, a buddy from my college days who'd built a solid reputation with the Denver Police Department. We'd stayed in touch over the years, occasionally meeting for coffee and talking about everything from construction contracts to his latest cases. Mark, I need your help with a corporate fraud case, I said, cutting straight to the point. Steve, from what you're describing, this sounds like serious federal crime territory, Mark replied after I gave him the basics. Corporate conspiracy, financial fraud, systematic sabotage. This isn't something for local PD. I'm calling the FBI immediately. By noon, Nancy and I were sitting across from attorney Carol Stevens in her downtown office. Carol had handled our corporate legal work for years, but she'd never seen us looking this grim. We need to make sure everything we're planning is completely legal and properly documented. I explained, showing her portions of the video evidence. Carol's expression grew increasingly serious as she watched. Steve, this is devastating stuff, but you're smart to involve law enforcement from the beginning. She began pulling together legal documents to protect both the company and our personal assets. If they've been systematically defrauding Mitchell Construction, we need immediate injunctions, ready to freeze any suspicious transfers. The afternoon was spent on technical preparations. Nancy, with her natural organizational skills, took charge of the audiovisual setup. She contacted the Brown Palace Hotel's events coordinator, explaining that we needed to set up presentation equipment for a special family announcement during the wedding reception. The hotel staff was incredibly accommodating, Nancy reported back. They think we're planning some kind of surprise slideshow for Joshua. They've agreed to have a large screen and sound system ready in the ballroom. By evening, Agent Brian Cooper from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division had been fully briefed on our situation. A tall, serious man in his 40s, Cooper reviewed our evidence with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen plenty of corporate conspiracies. This is solid work, he said, examining both the video footage and Nancy's financial documentation. We'll have agents positioned as wedding guests throughout the venue. Once you make your presentation and the evidence is public, we'll move in for arrests. What about charges? Nancy asked. Corporate fraud, conspiracy wire fraud. If they've used electronic communications to coordinate with outside parties, we're looking at serious federal time, Cooper replied. Your video evidence alone is probably enough, but combined with the financial records, this is airtight. As the evening wore on, the weight of what we were about to do settled heavily on both Nancy and me. This wasn't just about exposing Matthew and Ashley. It was about destroying Joshua's world on what should have been the happiest day of his life. 30 years building this company, I said, staring at the evidence spread across my dining room table. 30 years of 16-hour days, missed family dinners, sacrificed vacations. I won't let them destroy everything we've worked for. Nancy reached across and squeezed my hand. Dad Joshua will be heartbroken, but he needs to know the truth. Better he finds out now than after they've destroyed everything and disappeared. We spent the final hours reviewing every piece of evidence, making sure the video would play clearly on the hotel's system, coordinating timing with Agent Cooper's team. The plan was simple but devastating. Wait for the traditional moment when the officiant asks if anyone objects to the marriage, then present our evidence to the 300 assembled guests. They'll have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, Nancy said with quiet determination. Everyone who matters in Denver's business community will be watching. I looked at my daughter, my partner in this fight to save our family, and felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. We'd been forced into this position by people we'd trusted and loved. Sunday morning arrived with crisp October sunshine, the kind of perfect autumn day that should have been filled with joy and celebration. Everything was ready. The Brown Palace Hotel buzzed with excitement as 300 guests gathered for what they believed would be a perfect wedding celebration. The historic ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale with cascading arrangements of white roses and baby's breath. Hundreds of flickering candles casting warm light across the elegant space, and Denver's most prominent business leaders filling the ornate chairs. Joshua stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his face glowing with pure joy. He looked every inch the successful young man he'd become, confident, handsome, ready to start the next chapter of his life. Beside him, Matthew played his role to perfection, the supportive brother-in-law, adjusting Joshua's boutonniere with what appeared to be genuine affection. When the music began and Ashley appeared at the back of the ballroom, a collective sigh of admiration rippled through the crowd. She was absolutely stunning in her flowing white gown, her blonde hair perfectly styled, carrying herself with the grace of someone born for moments like this. No one watching could have imagined the deception hidden beneath that radiant smile. Nancy and I sat in the front row, our faces masks of composure while our hearts hammered with anticipation. Around us, family, friends, and business associates chatted quietly, completely unaware that they were about to witness something far different from the joyful celebration they'd expected. Agent Cooper had positioned himself 3 rows back, looking every bit the wedding guest in his dark suit and pleasant expression. I spotted 2 other agents scattered throughout the crowd, their professional training allowing them to blend seamlessly with the other attendees. The ceremony proceeded with traditional elegance. Joshua and Ashley exchanged vows. They'd written themselves their words about love and trust, and forever ringing with tragic irony to my ears. Matthew handed over the rings with a warm smile, playing his part in this elaborate charade right up to the final moment. The officiant, a distinguished older minister who'd known our family for years, beamed as he prepared for the final pronouncement. But first came the traditional question, the moment Nancy and I had been waiting for with a mixture of dread and determination. If anyone here has any reason why these 2 should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. The ballroom fell into the customary respectful silence. This was usually just a formality, a brief pause before the happy conclusion. I stood up. The effect was immediate and electric. 300 heads turned toward me, confusion and surprise rippling through the crowd like a wave. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not at weddings like this, not in families like ours. "I'm sorry, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent ballroom, "but I do have a reason." Joshua's face went through a rapid transformation, first confusion, then embarrassment, then something approaching panic. His cheeks flushed red, and his eyes darted between me and Ashley, as if trying to understand what nightmare he'd suddenly found himself in. "Dad, what are you doing?" he called out, his voice cracking with disbelief and rising hysteria. "Please not now, not here." "I'm sorry, son," I replied, my heart breaking as I looked into my boy's eyes, knowing I was about to shatter his world in front of everyone he cared about. "But you need to see who you're really about to marry. You deserve to know the truth." Ashley's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure remarkably well. Matthew, however, had taken a small step backward, his eyes darting toward the exits, like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. Nancy's hand moved to the remote control we'd positioned discreetly beside her purse. Her fingers were shaking as she found the right button. The hotel's technical staff had been incredibly professional, ensuring our surprise family slideshow would work flawlessly with their sound system. The large screen behind the altar flickered to life with a soft electronic hum. The first image that appeared was crystal clear and devastating. Matthew and Ashley locked in a passionate embrace among the roses at the Denver Botanic Gardens. The timestamp showed it was Friday afternoon during what should have been our peaceful wedding rehearsal. The image was so sharp, so undeniably real, that several guests gasped audibly. The ballroom erupted. Gasps echoed throughout the space, followed immediately by excited whispers, then louder conversations as people tried to process what they were seeing. Several guests pulled out their phones instinctively, some to record what was happening, others to text family members who weren't present. Camera flashes began going off sporadically. The video continued capturing not just the physical betrayal, but their voices, their casual, cold discussion of shell companies and bankruptcy and systematic destruction. "By Christmas, he'll be completely bankrupt." Ashley's voice rang out clearly through the hotel's professional sound system, her words echoing off the ornate walls. "Mitchell Construction will collapse and we'll buy it back for pennies on the dollar." Matthew's voice followed, equally clear, equally damning. The silence that had initially greeted my objection was nothing compared to the stunned quiet that now filled the ballroom. 300 people sat frozen in their chairs, trying to process what they were seeing and hearing. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others leaned forward, straining to hear every word. A few elderly guests looked confused, asking their companions to explain what was happening. Matthew and Ashley stood at the altar like statues, their faces masks of horror as their carefully constructed world collapsed in real time. Ashley's bouquet fell from her nerveless fingers, white roses scattering across the marble floor. And Joshua, my beloved son, my pride and joy, simply crumpled, falling to his knees. Right there at the altar, his anguished sobs echoing through the ballroom's suddenly oppressive silence. Chaos erupted in the elegant ballroom as the full weight of the revelation sank in. Guests leaped to their feet, some rushing toward the exits, others pulling out phones to capture the unfolding drama. The fairy tale wedding had transformed into a nightmare of public humiliation and shattered dreams. Ashley tried to run, gathering up her wedding dress as she headed for the nearest exit, but Agent Cooper was already moving. His calm demeanor never changed as he intercepted her near the ballroom doors. "Ashley Morgan, you're under arrest for corporate fraud and conspiracy," he said, producing handcuffs with professional efficiency. Matthew attempted a different strategy, trying to blend into the confused crowd of guests. But 2 other FBI agents had him surrounded before he made it 3 steps from the altar. "Matthew Taylor, you have the right to remain silent," one of them announced as they secured his hands behind his back. The sight of handcuffs at what should have been a joyful celebration sent another wave of shock through the remaining guests. This wasn't just family drama. This was federal crime being exposed in real time. Joshua had collapsed into one of the front row chairs, his face buried in his hands, his entire body shaking with the force of his sobs. Nancy immediately went to him, wrapping her arms around her little brother, despite everything he'd said to her just weeks before. "I'm so sorry, Josh," she whispered, her own tears flowing freely. "I tried to warn you. I tried so hard to make you see." "I know," he managed between sobs. "God, Nancy, I'm so sorry. I said such terrible things to you." I knelt down beside my son, this young man who'd had his world destroyed, in front of 300 witnesses. "Joshua," he looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I chose them over my own family." "Son, you were in love," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "That's not your fault. Love makes us vulnerable, makes us want to believe the best in people. That's not a weakness, that's what makes you a good man." As the FBI led Matthew and Ashley away in handcuffs, many of the guests began to leave, but not all of them. Several of our longtime business partners and family friends approached us, offering support and expressing their shock at what they'd witnessed. "Steve, if there's anything you need," said Tom Rodriguez from Rodriguez and Associates, "anything at all to help you rebuild from this, you just call." Similar offers came from other colleagues, people who understood that what they'd seen wasn't just personal betrayal, but an attack on the entire Denver business community's trust and integrity. 3 months later, the legal proceedings had concluded. Matthew received 8 years in federal prison for corporate fraud and conspiracy. Ashley got 6 years for her role in the scheme plus restitution requirements that would follow her for decades. Mitchell Construction not only survived but emerged stronger. The public exposure of the conspiracy actually enhanced our reputation. Clients and competitors alike respected how we'd handled the crisis with transparency and integrity. Joshua threw himself into therapy and work, slowly rebuilding his confidence and his ability to trust. The betrayal had wounded him deeply, but it also taught him valuable lessons about reading people and protecting himself. He was dating again, cautiously but hopefully. Nancy and I had grown closer through the ordeal, our partnership in exposing the conspiracy, creating a bond that went beyond typical father-daughter relationships. She'd proven herself not just as our CFO, but as someone with the courage to fight for what was right, even when it was painful. Family and truth are the most valuable things we have. I reflected one evening as we sat in my home office, reviewing the company's strong quarterly numbers. "And the hardest things to protect," Nancy added. "But worth every sacrifice," I replied. The experience taught us all crucial lessons about trust vigilance and the importance of listening to our instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. When family members raise concerns, they deserve to be heard. When people show you who they really are, believe them. Sometimes the people closest to us can cause the most damage. But when family stands together in truth and love, we can overcome anything. Looking back on this painful chapter of our lives, I've learned that God gives us instincts for a reason. When something feels wrong in your family or business, don't ignore that inner voice. It might be the Lord trying to protect you from devastating betrayal. This true story taught me that the people we trust most can sometimes hurt us deepest. But I've also learned that when we stand together as a family guided by faith and truth, we can overcome any deception. God has a way of exposing lies when the time is right, even if the revelation comes at our most vulnerable moments. Nancy often tells me this experience, though painful, was a blessing in disguise. Dad, she says, imagine if we hadn't discovered their plan until after they'd destroyed everything. She's right. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes He uses our darkest moments to save us from even greater destruction. These grandpa stories I share aren't just entertainment. They're warnings and wisdom passed down through generations. Every true story carries lessons that can help others avoid similar heartbreak. My grandfather used to say, "Boy, when family betrays family, only God can heal those wounds." I understand his words now more than ever. The construction business taught me to build on solid foundations, but life taught me that relationships require even stronger foundations of honesty and faith. When those foundations crack, you have to decide, rebuild with truth or let everything collapse.